she and I, or two or three of us, would get up here and talk about the subject of the day, which is character creation, character development, and so on. So I figured out a little blurb. It's about 3.5 pages in something akin to standard format. And you could go out and copy now, or?
I could listen for now, and then I'll take one home with me.
Okay.
I'd like to.
Anyway, some of the reviews on my books that you might find either on our website or on Amazon and stuff mention characters and mention them in a fairly favorable light. So maybe I am capable of creating memorable characters. When we talk about characters, they don't have to be human. I think we have two people right here whose characters exemplify that.
Yep.
So characters can be human, they can be android, they can be imaginary critters, they can be stuffed animals, they can be real animals, they can be just about anything you want them to be. I think a character could even be a machine or something. I've seen stories written where maybe what's the movie with Christine, the car?
The car.
Oh,
Yeah.
So is a Christine a character in that movie?
Yep.
So they can be just about anything. And characters, creating characters is an integral part of the story process, along with the plot and other aspects of the writing. It doesn't matter if the story you're telling is considered to be plot-driven or character-driven. You need both to make a story.
Yeah.
So if we're going to create characters, whether it's the first character that we introduce at the beginning of the story, or it's a new character that we meet halfway through the story, the first thing we basically do is ask ourselves, what is this character? And we try to come up with a general answer. For instance, is it make-believe? Is it a real person? Is it an animal? And so on. And I lost my place on the page again. So, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying not to read this. Okay. Whether it's the first character introduced at the beginning of the story, which I'm going to do anyway because it's easier, and it might be more understandable to you. Or a new character the reader meets while into the tale. We should first ask what this character is. A main character, protagonist, antagonist, love interest, friend, minor character, whatever he is, he or she or it is. In other words, who or what is this character in general terms? Now, the first character I created for the Stone Island Sea Stories, 2 volumes of which are sitting over here, and I created this character many, many years ago, would first of all simply be identified as a Royal Navy lieutenant at the end of the 18th century. So which of the 2,000 or so lieutenants at that time, and that's a somewhat educated guess, that were in the Royal Navy, which one is he? So I decided his name was Edward Pierce. Now some of you might remember that a few months ago, I gave a presentation right here on how I create character names. So I'm not going to go into that today because that would take us the rest of the time. And Sue would not have a chance, or else she'd throw me out anyway.
Yeah.
However, real briefly, I believe a character's name should match his or her nationality, ethnicity, gender, and fit the genre of the work that you're working on. Now, some of you may disagree, but I don't believe we need to provide a super detailed description, even of a major character. When we're introduced to Edward Pierce in the beginning of Beyond the Ocean's Edge, which is the one book I do not have up here today,
Oh, no.
we immediately learn he's English, or at least he's British, which in those days would indicate his white.
Yeah,
At one,
right now.
as one serving in the ship as third lieutenant, we can assume he's
So,
relatively
the
young.
other two,
We don't mention any physical abnormalities,
second page.
such as extreme height, weight, prominent scars, missing limbs, or so on, so we can picture him as a typical young Englishman of the time. And likely, any abnormality or unusual characteristics would be mentioned fairly soon in the book, in the story. We don't need such a detailed description that an artist could use that information to create an unidentified portrait that everyone that has read the story would instantly look at and say, oh, that's Edward Pierce. More important than identifying a character is the printed name on the page. The reader uses that to know we speak of that specific individual, and likely the reader will form an image or visage of that character in his or her mind. A reader will form different images for different characters. Now, while I have images of my characters as I write, it doesn't bother me if readers have different images of those same individuals. It doesn't bother me if readers view the ships and vessels differently than I do, or if they see the clothing and uniforms the characters wear as being different than I do. If the details of ships and clothing and other items are important, then as a writer, I should and I will try to provide more specific information. If we read a book and then see the movie based on those stories, we might realize that at least some of the characters don't look quite like we expected them to. Here, the appearance of that character is based on the visage image by the director, the producer, casting director, and so on. Or maybe the role went to whoever was available and willing to play the part. On the other hand, if we see a movie prior to reading the book it's based on, we will likely picture the characters as portrayed on the screen. When I read any of the so-called Master and Commander books by Patrick O'Brien, I imagine Captain Jack Aubrey, as looking a lot like Russell Crowe. And depending upon how a character was named, I might see the character as looking like the person who inspired that name. And there are a few characters whom I imagine looking like someone I thought might play them in a movie or series, if that ever came to be. I've always seen a character known as Harold Smythe as looking a little like Ricardo Montalban, both in his role with Mr. Rourke on Fantasy Island and as Khan in Star Trek. I see his characters a little bit of a blend of both of those, so I see him as playing those parts. Okay, so that basically takes care of character creation. The other aspect of it is development. And this is more of an ongoing process. And this is where we make a character a unique individual. Is he or she a good person or a bad person? How does the character treat others, regardless of social status between the two of them? What does he or she think of themselves? And this should be a process that goes on through the story, maybe even through multiple stories. We don't necessarily want to stop the story on page 5 and do 3 pages of so-and-so's personality. Stop that and get back with the story. We just want to keep going with the story and bring these things out, maybe one at a time, a little bit at a time, as the story goes on. Now, I see Edward Pierce that we've talked about as being what we would consider a good guy. And in most cases, he lives up to that expectation. Still, he has doubts of his own abilities, he worries about things, and now and then his temper gets the best of him. He's an avid coffee drinker. And at one point he's upset because the available brew is cold and strong, and even he can't drink it. He gets mad, throws his cup across the galley, and threatens the cook with very harsh punishments for not having fresh coffee ready. It's likely, and I don't remember if it happens in the story or not, but it's likely that he would eventually apologize to this. And they come around the next day. And you know, right now I don't remember the cookmate's name, but he would come around and say, "Hey, I'm sorry about that." And things would continue on. He's also one of those people that's willing to help anybody that needs help. Even though he's a lieutenant, if he sees a seaman out on the deck struggling to hoist a heavy load or something, he'd grab a hold, give him a hand, and help him hoist it up. Whereas another character that's in the beginning part of the story comes in and to notice every once in a while in the story, Lieutenant John Sollers wouldn't. He just yelled at the guy to put some more muscle into it and do it himself. Because Sollers is one of those individuals that's all about John Sollers. He's priority number one. And we can also give some individual characters, specific characteristics or habits to make them more unique. Perhaps an individual who tends to say a little more than he should, particularly let's say if he was a member of this group. I'm sitting here, we're all friends, we're all sitting here chatting fairly amiably and stuff. He just might say something that's a little embarrassing, a little more
TMI.
Beyond what he probably should say. Not enough to really get him or anybody in trouble, but it's enough to where the rest of us would notice, oh, he said that? And usually right afterwards, he says, oh my God, I said that. So, and I don't know, in a group like this, there's only two guys here. There is an individual in the Stone-on-Sea stories that seems to equate everything with sex.
Yep.
Not necessarily to be, but every movement, everything equates it to sex. And we also have another character in there that when he's getting ready to set something up, like earlier, Sue and I were setting up the PA system. And he's one of these people that looks like he kind of fumbles through everything, doesn't know what he's doing. And if it's something important, because he's the gunner's mate, the gunner, and sometimes some of the stuff he's trying to do is important, as in if you don't get it fixed, we're going to get blown up, or we're going to get shot or something. But he always seems to get it done. And all three of these people irritate purists to no end. Okay. I'm on the last page, the last paragraph. No applause? Okay. With really minor characters, we don't need to spend a lot of time or much effort in the development phase. Really all we got to do is introduce them by name, and that's about it. And some of these individuals might exist in a single scene, and if they're lucky, they might even have a word or two of dialogue. If we even name them, it's simply so one of the more prominent characters won't have to say, "Hey, you."
That's good.
All right.
That's good.
Hey, you.
So do we have questions or comments?
Questions or comments on this presentation here?
Took
Terry?
a lot of work.
Well, I was thinking my writing, and sometimes I don't have to try to develop character. The character is developed just by the scene.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, they kind of if you don't get it down on paper soon, they're wandering around inside your skull and knocking on it and saying, let me out, let me out.
That's good.
That's, I'm exaggerating, of course, but,
I don't have any specific process that I go through, it's just how the thing turns out afterwards.
yeah, and I think that, you know, part of this is if you get stuck, you can fall back on this, and if you're reading it critically, you set your manuscript aside for a while, and then you go back and reread it, and you think, why did I do that, you know? But you also can think, hey, I did a good job on that, I can't believe I wrote it. So, you know, it just depends on and every book that we write is a learning experience too. We get better. So anyway, and that's why we're doing these kind of workshop type things to help people hone their skills, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But should, Carol looks like she has a question.
Oh, no,
No?
Terry?
Well, you know, when I spoke in Civic Theater, there was a local writer, I don't know if anybody knows, Brian Harditoe. He wrote this one short play, and there was a minor character in it. It just took over the scene, and she wound up getting a lot bigger part in the story. Kind of reminds me of Sue.
What do I do now?
You know, I have the script with me, maybe I can bring it the next time.
Sure, that'd be
Sure.
interesting to find out. Now, the next Wednesday night meeting, we're gonna have Gary, the screenwriter.
Yes.
Yeah, he's gonna do stuff on screenwriting. I think it'll be fascinating. That's always fascinating me.
Mm-hmm.
So, just a little advance warning here.
Warning.
So
warning.
did you have anything else that you wanted to say on this? No? Okay, I guess,
Not right offhand, not unless somebody's got a question that,
yeah.
Yeah, I always wonder how much detail should I go into the character, or, because sometimes it'll bore the reader.
Well,
Or-
and you have to be careful, and if you introduce them a little bit at a time, like, I'll use my experience with Emily Trace and Darla. Darla is her temp secretary that she had to hire because she couldn't stay in the office all the time once she got a case. And so she called the temp agency and they sent Darla. And I described her a little bit because it set the stage for what kind of a person she was, you know, and so we did get some description of her. But as the story went along, and since it's a series, you can do this, you can make the character, reveal the character a little bit at a time, and even a book at a time, you know, and continue their story beyond just the one book. And so that's a good tool too. But yeah, I don't spend a lot of time on description either, unless it makes the story move along.
Right.
That's probably the best way to look at it. And I'm sure Dave does that. I love his books. They're so cool.
You have to read.
Yes, you definitely
You
do
don't keep
too.
reading and reading and reading.
I know. My stack of books is that high off the floor. With to be read books.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anybody else? For an outgoing person, you've been awfully quiet. But it's okay. I know, this is, I'm glad to hear. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go into this, the part that says, creating believable characters. I'm gonna read through this too, and then at the very end of what I do, instead of Q&A, we're gonna take a break, and I have a little project we can all work on, and then we'll talk about that at the end, okay? Okay, so I made this presentation a while back. Actually, I made it for Linda Bond's group when they were still meeting up at Auntie's on the mezzanine. I called it Creating Believable Characters, and this is a little different. I've updated it and stuff. But you'll notice on the second page there's a diagram. I'm going to be referring to that a lot. Okay? So, what makes a story great? Is it the plot, the research, the philosophy imparted to the reader? It's all those things, but the most important thing that makes a story stick in the reader's mind is the characters. Through the characters, the story is told, the philosophy imparted, and the research revealed. Your characters can make your book unforgettable. And let's look at some examples. The first one, I don't know if any of you read the Stephen King's The Stand. In my opinion, that was the best book he ever wrote. Okay, but it's kind of dark, but it's also got hope at the end, and dystopian future type thing. But there's a character in there that's mildly retarded, and he'll introduce himself, and he'll say, M-O-O-N, that spells Tom Cohen. And everything that he spells out is M-O-O-N. That serves for everything, and it's part of his personality. And he's one of the most memorable characters in The Stand. And of course, he's not the main protagonist, but plays a big part. Of course, there's also Mother Abigail in The Stand, and she describes herself as being 106 years old, and she still bakes her own bread. and you know, just Stephen King is a master at creating characters everyone remembers, I think. That's my personal opinion. And you mentioned Christine, or Carrie, wasn't it?
Christine.
Christine Zakar. Who's Carrie?
She's the one that got blood dumped on her at the prom.
Oh, okay, I didn't know. I've never read either one of those.
Okay.
But he is a master of the ones that I've read. Now, what about this one? Can you tell me who said this? I'll think about it tomorrow.
Scarlett O'Hara.
Yeah, it's Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. And she'd be just as resilient today as she was during and after the Civil War. And who could forget Rhett Butler, the scallywag and survivor in the Civil War? And he fell in love with Scarlett. It wasn't until the end that everybody realized how deeply he loved her. And at the very end, the last line is, frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn.
I know that.
Yeah. So I read that book when I was between 8th and 9th grade that summer. Anyway, and another one that she said, that was the one I just mentioned. Anyway, there's two ship's captains that were not Dave's creation, Captain Nemo and Captain Ahab. They were you'd never forget them. They were relentless and obsessed, but for entirely different reasons. And Sherlock Holmes and Miss Marple were great detectives, and yet they were different too. And they each had their own little idiosyncrasies, you know. So these things, two people couldn't have been much less alike than Sherlock Holmes and Miss Marple, I don't think. And yet Agatha Christie and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, they were good writers, you know. Okay, so let's look deeper into what makes a memorable character. First of all, the character can't be all good or all bad. to be believable, he has to have elements of both. He must also have some redeeming quality or value system or other reason for the reader to like and or sympathize with him. Unless, of course, he's one of the bad guys, then you don't want to get too close to him, probably, but like Voldemort. But yet you get some sympathy, develop some sympathy for the way that he was raised and how he was treated when he was young, and so you understand kind of that he had this power and he abused it and abused it and abused it more and more and more as time went on. And so a character quirk helps a lot too. Finally, this character must act in a way that is consistent with his basic personality type, which brings us to the main topic I want to share with you. So basically, there are 4 character types that you can identify. They're called different things by different people. I've got a chart over here for you to look at as I talk. I chose for this discussion the driver, the analytical, the expressive, and the amiable. That's illustrated in this chart. And I've added an example of each type based on Star Trek, the original series characters. Each personality focuses on, each personality type occupies its own quadrant, and each quadrant has 2 main characteristics. The driver, for example, focuses on facts, not feelings, and they also focus on telling rather than asking. So if you think about, this was one of the clues, what made me, Kirk was not the driver, even though he was the captain of the ship. Spock was the driver, because he was comfortable with himself. He didn't want to be the captain, he didn't want to be in charge, but he wanted to guide the captain in the way that he thought he should go. Anyway, so that's a quirk too, in a way. But the next, when you put a driver under stress, he first becomes a dictator. Then he tends to slip into avoidance mode, which is a negative trait of an analytical, pile on more pressure, and he attacks, which is a negative trait of an expressive. And finally, if he gets really, really pressured, then he gives in and gives up. And that's a negative quality of an amiable. So he's gone like a Z, backward Z. If you look at the chart, you draw a line between driver, analytical, expressive, and amiable. Well, if the driver character gets to that point, he probably either needs to be committed to a mental institution or something similar before he hurts himself or others. You know, it's pretty bad. So the progressive shift to the quadrants, they're calling it Zing out, because you put more and more and more pressure on. What you do as a writer, you know, you add things on and pile things on to these characters, and they perform differently. And that's how the story goes. Now, nobody is in just one quadrant. I've had people talk to me about what they think I am, and of course, you know, that's irrelevant. No, I have partly a driver personality and partly an expressive, so I'm down closer to the feelings than maybe a driver that's up here in this quadrant somewhere. Oh, you can't see where I'm pointing like that. If they're up towards the top, then they're more strongly a driver. If they go over this way, they don't as much tell as they do ask. Are you seeing what I'm saying? But a driver expressive, it gets more down toward the feelings. So it's kind of, you fit in one place. And interestingly enough, an amiable, which is somebody that gets along with just about everybody, they can slide into a different quadrant and out whenever they want. They're really good at that. So maybe that's why they get along with everybody. But anyway, this has been used as a sales tool in business or a marketing tool. It's been used as a counseling tool. There was a Christian lady named, I know her name, Florence Littauer, and she wrote a whole book about all of this. She calls it different names, but it's the same quadrant, and it behaves the same. And so her focus was on the Christian focus. But it's an interesting way to look at your characters, and if you have a mix of characters as the main part of your story, you're gonna have a balance that this Star Trek original series pretty much had. They had Scotty, they had Spock, they had Bones, and they had Kirk, and so they had this balance, and it worked. So that was just an idea of what you can do with creating your characters. Now, a final caveat. Well, no, I already did that. We're usually hybrids, okay, of a couple of different ones. But the next thing I want to talk about is the character arc. Where do these people go in the story? You start the story out. If you think of a rainbow, and I'm going to do it this way so it's for you guys, okay? You start out on this side, that's the beginning. It's how the character is in the beginning. And if they don't appear till the middle of the story, they're still at that part of their arc. And the right one is the pot of gold. That's where they end up, okay? And they go through this arc. And it's not a gravity thing, it's just the way that things move. They go through all these pressures and all these circumstances, and they come out at a certain point in the end. And they're different than they were when they started, a little bit. Okay, so remember I did a while back, I did a thing about storyline and how a 3-act play would go, and I gave handouts for that, and how when you put the pressure on to make it the most effective, and where the plot points are, and where the inciting incident is. I don't know if you guys were here for that or not, but anyway, it's similar for a person, for the plot, okay? This is a character arc too. It's similar. You establish the kind of person he or she is at the beginning. Then you throw obstacles at the person and observe how the poor character deals with each one. And you just keep piling them on, because that's what makes the story. And then, by the end, your character has grown and changed a little bit, hopefully in a positive way if you're looking at a protagonist. The same process works for the antagonist, although that one may do some of the throwing of obstacles in the way. Maybe he or she starts out by being protective of the antagonist, then does subtle things to gain control over this hero, and finally resorts to violence and crime to achieve his or her aims. Maybe the antagonist starts out with a desire to help, but succumbs to a baser temptation to gain money, power, or fame. And so that's a character arc for an antagonist. And it may help to think of one of your own weaknesses, such as being judgmental, and have your protagonist struggle to keep from judging others. That's just one idea, Maybe they're obsessive compulsive, maybe they're undisciplined in some way, or, there's a lot of things you could do. Or you may have him or her discover that fault in themselves and have them conquer the fault, or have them accept it as part of who they are, or proudly own it. You know, you can go any way you want. The way you have a character deal with the defect can be part of the story arc. This is especially good if you're writing a series with this character as a star. You can show how they grow and change as they live their life. And that's really what life is all about, you know? So think of a series you know to help, a series you don't, to help you get a grip on the concept of a character arc. For a few examples, identify the protagonist or protagonists, the antagonist or antagonists, and one or more of the following. Okay, and this is an assignment we're going to work on when we take a break, okay? Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. And it's different than the movies. If you've seen the movies, you can do that, and you haven't read the books, but I really recommend reading the books because you're missing out on a lot if you don't. There's the Lord of the Rings series by J.R.R. Tolkien. There's the Dragon Riders of Pern by Anne McCaffrey. Are any of you familiar with that one?
I'm familiar with.
You are?
Yeah, I have a brother-in-law, their uncle, who I think has read at least most of the series.
Yeah, and they're fascinating the way she weaves the stories together. She's written a lot of books on this one world that she created called Pern. And one of the antagonists in that is what they call thread, and it's this thing that falls out of the sky and eats everything that's organic. And the only thing that stops it is water or fire or stone. It can't eat those things. So, anyway, that's the story on that. And then there's also the Chronicles of Narnia as another one. That's C.S. Lewis. Then you follow each protagonist and antagonist and describe their respective character arcs. Even if you only follow one main hero and one villain, the exercise should deepen your understanding and ability to create characters who have depth and who stay in the reader's memory. And that's, we're gonna take a break, and I'm gonna let you just take one of these and write all that you want on it. And after we get treats and have some time to write, we'll come back together and we can share what we've written. Okay?